They called her the Ghost Girl. For 3 weeks, Elowyn Ashvale had scrubbed the cold stone floors of Thornvale Citadel, invisible to everyone except when they needed someone to blame. She was a servant without a past, a wolf-less nobody who had woken in a riverbed 6 months ago with no memory of who she was or where she came from. The healers said her mind was broken. The other servants said she was cursed. But every night when the Alpha King's infant son screamed until his voice turned raw, Elowyn felt something stirring beneath her ribs. Something primordial. Something that recognized that cry. They said the pup was inconsolable, that he had been wailing since his mother died in childbirth 8 months ago. They said he was damaged, difficult, destined to be weak. They were all wrong. Because when Elowyn finally looked into that nursery, when she finally saw what was hidden behind the lace canopy, she did not see a broken child. She saw the truth. And the truth was about to burn her enemies to ash. The servants' quarters of Thornvale Citadel smelled of mildew, lye soap, and quiet desperation. Elowyn knelt on the flagstones outside the great kitchen, scrubbing a rust-colored stain that had been there longer than she had. Her fingers were cracked and bleeding. The head housekeeper, a pinch-faced woman named Greta, had assigned her this task 3 hours ago with a sneer that suggested she hoped Elowyn would still be scrubbing come morning. "Still at it, little ghost?" A sharp heel clicked against the stone. Elowyn did not need to look up. She knew that voice. It dripped with honeyed venom and belonged to Lady Ravenna Crow, the unmated daughter of the Western Alpha. Ravenna had arrived at Thornvale 2 months before Elowyn, positioning herself as the obvious candidate to become the new Luna. The old Luna, Alpha Kalen's fated mate, had died bringing his heir into the world. At least, that was what everyone said. "The stain is old, my lady," Elowyn murmured, keeping her eyes down. "It may not come out." Ravenna laughed, a crystalline sound that made the other servants freeze in their tasks. She was beautiful in the way a viper was beautiful. Dark hair cascading over alabaster shoulders, lips painted crimson, eyes the color of a winter storm. "Then scrub harder." Ravenna's heel came down on Elowyn's hand, grinding her knuckles into the wet stone. Elowyn bit her tongue so hard she tasted copper. "The Alpha King is hosting the Council of Territories tomorrow evening. If he sees this filth, I will personally ensure you are sent to the rogue camps." Elowyn's chest tightened. The rogue camps were death sentences. Wolves without packs did not survive there. And Elowyn had no wolf at all, or so they believed. "Yes, my lady," she whispered. Ravenna released her hand and sauntered away, her silk gown trailing across the floor Elowyn had already cleaned twice. The other servants exchanged glances but said nothing. No one defended the ghost girl. No, one remembered where she came from because she did not remember herself. She had simply appeared at the Citadel gates, barefoot and starving, with nothing but a tattered dress and a crescent-shaped scar behind her left ear. The old groundskeeper had taken pity on her. The Alpha King had granted her a position in the household without so much as looking at her. That was 3 weeks ago. Elowyn had not seen him since. But she had heard his son. Every single night, starting at moonrise, the infant prince would begin to scream. It was not the cry of a hungry baby or a child with nightmares. It was a sound of pure anguish, as if something was hurting him, as if something was terribly wrong. The nurses rotated constantly. None lasted more than a few days. They claimed the child was possessed, cursed, touched by dark spirits. But Elowyn had noticed something the others had not. The screaming always intensified at exactly the same moment, when Lady Ravenna's shadow passed beneath the nursery window, as if the child could sense a predator circling. That night, Elowyn lay on her thin straw mattress in the servants' attic, staring at the ceiling. The wood was warped and stained, letting in drafts that made her shiver despite the threadbare blanket. But it was not the cold keeping her awake. It was the crying. Even 3 floors below and across the eastern wing she could hear him. Prince Ashwin, 8 months old, screaming as though his soul was being torn apart. The sound burrowed into her chest and twisted something she could not name. Go to him. The thought came unbidden. It made no sense. She was a floor scrubber, not a nurse. She had no right to enter the royal wing. If she was caught, Greta would have her whipped. If Ravenna found out, she would be sent to the rogues. But the pull was undeniable. Alawan pressed her palm against her sternum, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. Fragmented images flickered behind her eyes. A moonlit garden, the scent of jasmine, strong arms holding her close, a voice whispering, "I will find you. No matter what happens, I will always find you." She gasped, sitting upright. The vision vanished like smoke. What was that? Her memories were shattered glass. The healers said they might never return. But lately, whenever she heard the prince crying, shards of something surfaced. Feelings without context, grief without reason, and a desperate, clawing need to hold that child in her arms. "You are losing your mind," she told herself. "He is not your son. You are no one." But her wolf, if she even had one, disagreed. Deep in the hollow place where her beast should have lived, something stirred. It was faint, barely a whisper, like a heartbeat heard through thick walls. It had been silent since she woke in that riverbed. Silent until she arrived at Thornvale. Silent until she heard Ashwin cry. Alawan rose from her mattress. Her bare feet touched the icy floor. She told herself she was only going to walk, to clear her head, to escape the attic's suffocating stillness, but her feet carried her toward the eastern wing. The corridors were empty at this hour. Torchlight flickered against tapestries depicting wolf kings and bloody conquests. Alawan moved like a shadow, her servant's instincts keeping her silent and unseen. The crying grew louder. She reached the nursery door. It was slightly ajar, a sliver of candlelight spilling into the hallway. "Turn back. This is madness." Her hand pressed against the wood. The door swung open. The nursery was bathed in soft golden light. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across walls painted with silver moons and white wolves. It was a room fit for a prince. Velvet curtains, a carved mahogany crib, shelves lined with toys that had never been touched. But Elowen saw none of it. Her entire world narrowed to the crib. The screaming had stopped the moment she crossed the threshold. An impossible silence hung in the air, thick and breathless. She approached slowly, her heart pounding so violently she could hear it in her ears. The crib's canopy obscured her view. She reached out, her raw and trembling fingers shaking, and drew back the lace. Prince Ashwin stared up at her. He was pale, far too pale for a wolf-born child. His cheeks were hollow, his tiny body thinner than it should have been at 8 months. Dark circles ringed his eyes, as though he had not slept properly in weeks. But it was his eyes that made Elowen freeze. They were violet. Not the amber of his father's bloodline, not the gray of the northern wolves. They were the exact shade of crushed lavender at twilight. Rare, impossible, and utterly familiar. Because when Elowen looked into the prince's eyes, she saw her own reflection staring back. No, her knees buckled. She gripped the edge of the crib to stay upright. This cannot be. The fragmented vision slammed into her. A birthing chamber soaked in blood, her own screams echoing off stone walls, hands ripping her newborn from her arms. A woman's voice, cold and triumphant. "Take her to the river. Make sure she does not surface." Elowen gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. "You are mine," she whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. "You are my son." Ashwin reached up with one tiny hand and touched her face. The moment his skin met hers, a jolt of energy surged through Elowen's body. It was lightning and fire, and the roar of 1,000 wolves howling in unison. Inside her chest, the hollow place exploded with light. "Mother." The voice was not her own. It was eternal, feminine, and furious. "They tried to kill us. They stole our pup. They will pay." Elowen's vision blurred. Her bones began to ache, a deep grinding pressure that made her cry out. "No!" she gasped, stumbling backward. "Not here. Not now." The nursery door slammed open. Lady Ravenna stood in the doorway, her face twisted with shock that quickly curdled into murderous rage. Behind her stood 2 armed guards. "I knew it." Ravenna hissed. "I knew you were not just a stray." She turned to the guards. "Seize her. She is trying to kidnap the prince." "He is my son," Elowen screamed, the truth tearing from her throat. Ravenna smiled, slow and venomous. "Your son?" She laughed, the sound echoing through the nursery. "The Luna died in childbirth, you delusional wretch. Everyone saw her body burn on the pyre." Ravenna stepped closer, her eyes glittering with malice. "But if you want to join her so badly, I am happy to arrange it." The guards grabbed Elowen's arms, dragging her away from the crib. Ashwin began to scream again, louder than before, a sound of pure infant terror. And deep inside Elowen, the wolf that had been sleeping for 8 months opened her eyes. The great hall of Thornvale Citadel was not designed for mercy. Massive stone pillars rose toward a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. Torches blazed in iron sconces, casting harsh light across the gathered crowd. It was past midnight, but word had spread like wildfire. The ghost girl had been caught in the prince's nursery, her hands on the royal heir. Elowen was thrown onto the cold marble floor, her knees cracking against the stone. Her wrists were bound behind her back, with iron shackles that burned against her skin. Around her, servants and nobles alike stared with a mixture of horror and morbid curiosity. At the far end of the hall, on a throne carved from black granite, sat Alpha King Kalen Dravos. Elowen's breath caught in her throat. He was devastating. Broad shoulders, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, hair the color of a raven's wing falling across a face carved from ice. His eyes were the amber of molten gold, timeless and unreadable. A thin scar ran from his left temple to his cheekbone, a memento from wars she could not remember. But it was not his beauty that made her heart stutter. It was the ache. The hollow, screaming ache in her chest that roared mate, mate, mate with every beat of her pulse. "I know him." The realization crashed through her like a tidal wave. The fragmented visions, the pull toward his son, the voice in her dreams. It all made devastating sense. He is mine. Ashwin is ours. I am his Luna. But Kalen looked at her with nothing. No recognition. No spark. His golden eyes swept over her kneeling form as though she were an insect beneath his boot. "What is this?" His voice was deep, cold, utterly devoid of emotion. Lady Ravenna stepped forward, her crimson gown flowing behind her like a pool of blood. She had rearranged her features into a mask of distressed concern. "My king, I discovered this creature in the prince's nursery. She had her hands on Ashwin. I believe she intended to steal him, or worse." Ravenna dabbed at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief. The poor child was screaming in terror. "He was screaming because he recognized me," Elowen shouted, struggling against the guards. "I am his mother. I am your—" A guard struck her across the face. Stars exploded behind her. "Eyes." "Silence," Kalen commanded. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The weight of his alpha aura pressed down on the room like a physical force. Alawan's wolf, the wolf that had been stirring just moments ago, whimpered and retreated. Kaelin descended from his throne, each footstep echoing through the silent hall. He stopped 3 feet from Alawan, staring down at her with those unfeeling amber eyes. "My Luna died 8 months ago," Kaelin said, his voice flat. "I watched her body burn. I scattered her ashes myself." He crouched, gripping Alawan's chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You are either a liar, a lunatic, or a spy. Which is it?" "None," Alawan whispered, tears streaming down her bruised cheek. "Kaelin, please. Look at me. Look at my eyes. Ashwin has my eyes. Someone did this to us. Someone made you forget." For one breathless moment, something flickered in his gaze, a crack in the ice. Then Ravenna spoke. "My king, the poor thing is clearly deranged. The trauma of her past has broken her mind." She placed a delicate hand on Kaelin's shoulder, and Elowen watched his expression shutter closed. "But we cannot ignore the threat." She touched the prince. If she is a spy from the southern Pax, she could have been trying to curse him. The crowd murmured in agreement. Kaelin released Elowen's chin and rose to his full height. "Take her to the execution yard," he said, turning his back on her. "She dies at dawn." The execution yard was a barren courtyard behind the citadel, surrounded by walls too high to climb and guarded by wolves who showed no mercy. A wooden post stood in the center, stained dark with the blood of those who had knelt there before. Ilawan was chained to the post, her arms wrenched above her head, her bare feet numb against the frozen ground. Snow had begun to fall, dusting her thin servant's dress with flecks of white. She had stopped crying. There were no tears left. Ashwin. Her son was alone in that nursery, crying for a mother who would never come. Ravenna would sink her claws into Kaelin, become Luna, and Ashwin would grow up believing his real mother was dead. No. Something snapped inside Alowan's chest. It was not despair. It was not surrender. It was a door being kicked open, a seal being shattered by pure maternal rage. "They will not take him from me." The voice in her head roared with primal fury. "They will never take our pupe." Heat exploded through Elowen's veins. It was not the gentle warmth of a first shift. It was molten silver pouring through every cell of her body, burning away the chains that had suppressed her wolf for 8 agonizing months. She screamed, but the sound was not human. It tore from her throat as a howl that shook the snow from the citadel walls. The guards stumbled backward, their faces pale with terror. "What is happening?" one of them shouted. "Get the Alpha King, now!" Alawan's spine arched. Her bones began to crack and reform, the sound echoing across the courtyard, like snapping branches. Fur erupted from her skin, not gray, not brown, and not black. White. Radiant, luminous white, shimmering with an inner glow as though the moon itself had taken physical form. The iron chains shattered like glass. Alawan, or the beast she had become, rose onto 4 massive paws. She was enormous, standing nearly 6 feet at the shoulder, dwarfing any alpha wolf in recorded history. Her eyes blazed with silver light, pupils slitted like a predator from timeless nightmares. The guards fell to their knees. Not by choice. Their wolves forced them down, recognizing a power that transcended pack hierarchy. From the ramparts above, a horn began to wail. Inside the citadel, every wolf felt it. A pulse of energy that rippled through the bond like an earthquake. Glasses shattered, candles extinguished. Children woke screaming. And in the nursery, Prince Ashwin stopped crying for the first time in 8 months. He smiled. The great hall erupted into chaos. Nobles scrambled from their seats, their wolves howling warnings inside their minds. Servants dropped trays and fled. The chandeliers swung violently, crystals crashing to the marble floor. Alpha King Kalen stood frozen at his throne, his amber eyes wide for the first time anyone could remember. He felt it. Every wolf in the citadel felt it. Luna. Not just any Luna. The Luna of legend. The white wolf of the old prophecies. The one who was supposed to have died out 1,000 years ago. The great doors of the hall exploded inward. Splinters of oak and iron flew across the room. Nobles screamed, diving for cover. Through the debris strode the wolf, the massive, luminous beast that had once been a scrubbing girl named Elowen. She was terrifying. She was beautiful. She was wrath incarnate. Her silver eyes swept the room, and wherever her gaze landed, wolves dropped to their knees. Betas, warriors, even the visiting alphas from the eastern territories, none could withstand the pressure of her aura. All except one. Kalen remained standing, his hands clenched into fists, his chest heaving. The mate bond, dormant, suppressed, buried under layers of dark magic, was screaming inside his skull. Mate. She is my mate. He staggered, gripping the arm of his throne. Impossible, he breathed. The white wolf stopped 10 feet from the dais. She did not attack. She did not snarl. She simply looked at him with those silvered eyes, and in them, Kalen saw everything. The memories that had been stolen, the lies that had been fed, the mate he had mourned for 8 months. Ilawen. The wolf opened her jaws and released a sound that was not a roar, but a song. A mournful, echoing howl that resonated with something buried deep in Kalen's fractured soul. Around the hall, wolves began to weep. They did not know why. The sound simply reached into their chests and pulled out grief they had never known they carried. Lady Ravenna stood behind a pillar, her face white as bone, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. "Kill it!" she shrieked, pointing at the wolf. "She is a demon, a monster. Kill her before she destroys us all." No one moved. No one could move. The white wolf turned her head slowly, those silver eyes locking onto Ravenna with the patience of a predator who knows her prey has nowhere to run. Ravenna's scream died in her throat, and from the upper balcony, hidden in shadow, a slow clapping began. Everyone looked up. A woman stood there, tall, silver-haired, draped in robes of midnight blue. Her eyes were the same impossible silver as the wolf below. "Finally," the woman said, her voice carrying through the silent hall like a temple bell. "The Moonborn has awakened." The silver-haired woman descended from the balcony with supernatural grace, her feet barely touching the stairs. The crowd parted before her like water before a blade. Even the alphas who had remained standing now bowed their heads, recognizing a power far older than pack politics. She was Seraphina Lunaire, the high oracle of the Moonborn conclave, a figure most believed to be myth, a bedtime story told to frighten ambitious wolves. Yet here she stood, flesh and blood, her silver eyes fixed on the massive white wolf with an expression of profound reverence. 300 years, Seraphina whispered, stopping before the wolf. 300 years since the last Moonborn walked among us. We had almost given up hope. The white wolf's form began to shimmer. Bones cracked and reformed. Fur receded like morning mist. In moments, Ilawen stood naked and trembling on the marble floor, her pale hair cascading down her back like a waterfall of starlight. Seraphina removed her midnight cloak and wrapped it around Ilawen's shoulders, shielding her from the stares of the court. "Who are you?" Ilawen's voice was hoarse, raw from the shift. "I am your grandmother," Seraphina said softly. "Or rather, your grandmother many generations removed. The Moonborn bloodline was thought to be extinct." The last of our kind was hunted and killed during the Purge of Silver. She cupped Elowen's face, her ageless eyes glistening with tears. But the moon goddess hid one child, one survivor, your ancestor. And now, after centuries of dormancy, the blood has awakened in you. Kaelin stepped forward, his face a mask of warring emotions, confusion, disbelief, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "This is impossible," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "My Luna died. I saw her body. I held her hand as she—" He stopped, pressing his palm against his temple as though fighting a migraine. "I remember her face, her scent. She was not Elowen." "Because your memories were altered," Seraphina said, turning to face the Alpha King. "Dark magic, blood sorcery. Someone very powerful did not want you to recognize your true mate." Kaelin's amber eyes snapped to Ravenna, who was slowly backing toward the servants' entrance. "Seize her," Kaelin commanded. 2. Guards intercepted Ravenna before she could flee, dragging her forward and forcing her to her knees. "This is absurd!" Ravenna shrieked, her composure finally cracking. "I am the daughter of the Western Alpha. You cannot treat me like a common criminal based on the ravings of some witch, and a delusional servant." Seraphina approached Ravenna with the calm of a woman who had witnessed centuries of mortal foolishness. She placed one finger on Ravenna's forehead. Ravenna screamed. It was a sound of pure agony, as though her very soul was being peeled back and examined. When Seraphina removed her finger, Ravenna collapsed, gasping and sobbing. "The stench of blood magic clings to her like rot," Seraphina announced. "She did not cast the spells herself. She lacks the power. But she commissioned them, paid for them with gold and promises." The oracle's voice hardened. "She arranged for the true Luna to be drugged during childbirth, her memories stripped, and her body thrown into the river to drown. A decoy corpse was burned on the pyre. Everyone mourned a stranger." The hall erupted in horrified whispers. Kaelin stared at Ravenna, his face pale as death. "You tried to murder my mate," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You tried to orphan my son." Ravenna looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks, and in her eyes Elowen saw no remorse, but hatred. "She was no one," Ravenna spat, "a wolf less Omega from a forgotten bloodline. She did not deserve you. She did not deserve any of this. I would have been a perfect Luna. I would have given you strong heirs. She is a freak, a monster, and if you choose her over me, you are a fool." Kaelin's hand closed around Ravenna's throat. "Kaelin." Elowen's voice cut through the red haze of his rage. "Stop!" The Alpha King's grip tightened for one heartbeat, then released. Ravenna crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. Kaelin turned to Elowen, his amber eyes blazing with a desperate, fractured intensity. "She tried to kill you," he said. "She stole 8 months of our lives. She made me mourn you while you were scrubbing floors in my own citadel." His voice cracked. "I walked past you a dozen times. I did not recognize my own mate." Elowen approached him slowly, the oracle's cloak trailing behind her. She reached up and touched his face, the first time they had touched since the dark magic had severed their bond. The effect was immediate. Kaelin gasped, his eyes rolling back as memories crashed through the dam that had held them captive. He saw their first meeting in the moonlit garden of her father's territory. He saw their mating ceremony under a canopy of stars. He saw Elowen's face, radiant with joy, as she told him she was carrying his heir. And he saw the night everything was taken. Ravenna's servants holding Elowen down, the witch pouring black liquid down her throat, Elowen screaming, begging, fighting to protect their unborn child. The cold command, "Dump her in the river," The current will do the rest. Kalen fell to his knees, a broken sound tearing from his chest. I failed you, he choked. I should have sensed the magic. I should have known. Elowyn knelt beside him, pulling his head against her chest. You were a victim too, she whispered. We both were. But we survived. Ashwin survived. That is what matters now. Seraphina watched the reunion with knowing eyes. She allowed them a moment before speaking. There is more you must understand, child, the oracle said. Your awakening was not random. The Moonborn bloodline carries power that transcends ordinary wolves. We are conduits of the moon goddess herself. Healers, seers, and in times of great darkness, destroyers. Elowyn looked up. I do not understand. Your son's constant crying, Seraphina continued. It was not colic or trauma. Ashwin sensed the wrongness. His moonborn blood, inherited from you, could feel that his mother was alive but severed from him. Every night he screamed for you, and every night the dark magic kept you both apart. The realization hit Elowyn like a physical blow. He knew, she breathed. My baby knew. The bond between a moonborn mother and her pup is unbreakable, Seraphina confirmed. Ravenna's witch could suppress your memories and alter your scent, but she could not sever that primal connection. It is why you were drawn to the nursery. It is why your wolf finally broke free when they threatened to execute you. The maternal bond overrode every suppression. Kalen rose to his feet, his expression hardening into something dangerous. Where is this witch? He demanded. I want her found and brought before me. She has already fled, Seraphina said. I sensed her departure an hour ago, but she did not act alone. The magic used on Elowyn was forbidden. It required resources beyond what Ravenna could provide. Ravenna laughed from her place on the floor, a broken, hysterical sound. You think I orchestrated this alone? She grinned up at them with bloody teeth. My father wants this territory. The southern packs want your bloodline ended. I was merely the instrument. Kill me if you wish. 100 more will take my place. Elowyn felt the cold weight of the revelation settle into her bones. This was not a personal vendetta. This was war. The Western Alpha, Kalen growled. He sanctioned this. He funded it, Ravenna confirmed, seemingly unconcerned with her own fate. And when you are distracted by your touching reunion, his armies will be crossing the border. By dawn, Thornvale will burn. As if summoned by her words, a horn sounded in the distance, long, low, and unmistakably hostile. A guard burst through the side entrance, his face pale with terror. My king! An army approaches from the Western Pass. Thousands of wolves. They fly the banner of the Western Alpha and... He hesitated, swallowing hard. And someone else. A black banner with a silver serpent. The mark of the Dreadmoon Covenant. Seraphina's face went pale for the first time. The Covenant, she whispered. They have allied with the Blood Mages. Kalen drew his sword. How long until they reach the Citadel? 2 hours, the guard stammered. Maybe less. Kalen turned to Elowyn, his amber eyes meeting her silver. Can you fight? Elowyn looked at Ravenna's smirking face. She thought of her son, asleep in the nursery, innocent and vulnerable. She thought of the 8 months stolen from her, the pain, the isolation, the despair. The wolf inside her stirred, and this time Elowyn did not push her down. Give me a blade, she said, her voice cold as winter steel, and watch me. The War Council convened in the throne room within minutes. Maps were spread across the great table. Generals argued over defensive positions. Scouts reported enemy numbers that grew more terrifying with each update. 20,000 wolves, 300 blood mages, and at their head, Western Alpha Corvinus Crow, Ravenna's father, a man who had spent 30 years conquering smaller territories through brutality and betrayal. But the true danger was not Corvinus. The Dread Moon Covenant has not marched to war in 2 centuries, Seraphina said, her voice grave. They are fanatics who believe the Moonborn are abominations, that our power should have died with the old gods. If they have joined this alliance, their goal is not territory. She looked at Elowen. Their goal is extinction. Your extinction. Elowen absorbed this information with unnatural calm. 3 weeks ago, she had been scrubbing stains from stone floors. Now death cults wanted her head. Then we give them a fight they will never forget, she said. The doors of the throne room slammed open. A figure strode through, tall, scarred, and radiating malevolent authority. He wore black armor etched with silver serpents, and his eyes were the lifeless gray of a frozen lake. Corvinus Crow. Behind him walked a dozen elite warriors, their presence a blatant violation of every law of parley. I let myself in, Corvinus said, smiling at Kaelin with yellow teeth. Your guards were persuadable. Kaelin's sword was drawn in an instant, but Seraphina raised a hand. He comes under the flag of negotiation, she said. The old laws protect him until he speaks his terms. Corvinus laughed, a grating, humorless sound. How civilized. His pale eyes slid to Elowen, and something dark flickered in their depths. So this is the Moonborn, the one who was supposed to drown like a sack of unwanted kittens. He clicked his tongue. My daughter is many things, but competent is not among them. State your terms and leave, Kaelin commanded, his voice shaking with restrained fury. Corvinus clasped his hands behind his back, strolling casually toward the throne. Surrender the Moonborn to the Covenant, abdicate your throne and swear fealty to me. Your son will be raised in my household as assurance of your loyalty. He paused before the dais, looking up at the black granite seat. Do this, and your people will be spared. And if I refuse? Then by dawn, there will not be a single wolf left alive in Thornvale. I will hang your son from the citadel gates as a warning to any who harbor Moonborn blood. Elowen stepped forward before Kaelin could respond. You threaten my son, she said softly. You invade my home. You allied with blood mages and death cults to murder me before I even knew what I was. She stopped 3 feet from Corvinus, close enough to see the veins pulsing in his temples. And now you expect us to kneel? Corvinus leaned down, his death-pale eyes boring into hers. You are one wolf girl, awakened for all of an hour. You do not even know how to use your power. What could you possibly do against 20,000? Elowen smiled. It was not a kind smile. Challenge, she said clearly, her voice ringing through the hall. I invoke the right of lunar dominion. Single combat. Alpha against alpha. Winner takes all. Corvinus stared at her, then burst into laughter. You cannot be serious. You are not even an alpha. I am Moonborn, Elowen replied. By the old laws, I outrank every alpha on this continent. And if you refuse my challenge, every wolf in your army will know you feared a woman who was scrubbing floors yesterday. The laughter died. Corvinus's face twisted with rage. Fine, he spat. At dawn. In the valley below. I will tear your throat out myself, and then I will make your mate watch as I... Dawn, Elowen interrupted. Bring your army. Bring your mages. Bring everyone. She turned her back on him, a deliberate insult. You will need witnesses for what I am about to do. The Valley of Echoes lay between 2 jagged mountain ridges, a natural amphitheater where disputes had been settled since the first wolves walked these lands. As the sun crested the eastern peaks, 20,000 enemy wolves filled the slopes, their howls creating a cacophony of bloodlust. At the northern edge stood the defenders of Thornvale, outnumbered 5-1 but refusing to yield. In the center of the valley, two figures faced each other. Corvinus Crow had shifted into his wolf form, a massive black beast with gray-streaked fur and eyes like frozen silver. He was enormous, battle-scarred, and radiating the confidence of a predator who had never known defeat. Opposite him stood Elowen. She had not yet shifted. She wore simple black combat attire provided by Kalen's armory, her pale hair braided back like a warrior queen. In her hand, she held no weapon. She needed none. "Last chance to run, little Moonborn," Corvinus growled, his voice carrying across the silent valley. "I will make your death quick if you submit now." Elowen closed her eyes. Inside her mind, she spoke to the wolf. "Are you ready?" "I have been ready for 300 years," the wolf replied. "Let us remind them why they feared us." Elowen opened her eyes. They blazed silver. She did not shift violently. She did not scream or writhe. The transformation was elegant, almost gentle, her human form dissolving into light before reforming as the white wolf. But this time, she was different. The first shift had been raw, uncontrolled, fueled by terror and desperation. This shift was intentional, and the wolf that emerged was not merely large. She was transcendent. Her fur shimmered with an inner luminescence that made it painful to look directly at her. Her eyes were twin suns, blazing with silver fire. And when she planted her paws on the frozen ground, cracks spiderwebbed outward across the entire valley floor. The enemy wolves fell silent. Even Corvinus hesitated, his confidence flickering for the first time. Then he charged. He was fast, faster than any wolf his age had a right to be. 30 years of war had honed him into a perfect killing machine. His jaws aimed for Elowen's throat, intending to end the fight in one brutal strike. Elowen did not dodge. She caught him. Her jaws closed around his neck mid-lunge, and with a single motion, she slammed him into the earth so hard the impact created a crater. The sound echoed off the mountains like thunder. Corvinus yelped, scrambling to regain his footing, but Elowen gave him no chance. She was on him instantly, her massive paw pinning his chest, her claws drawing blood through his thick fur. He snapped at her, catching her foreleg and tearing flesh. Pain flared, but it only sharpened her focus. "You threaten my pup," she projected into his mind, her voice a thunderclap. "You poisoned my mate. You stole 8 months of my life." She bit down on his shoulder, shaking him like a rag doll. Bones crunched. Corvinus howled in agony. "And now you will answer for all of it." He tried to shift back to human form, a desperate attempt to invoke the mercy traditionally shown to defeated wolves who surrendered their beast. But Elowen's aura pressed down on him, pinning his wolf in place. "No escape," she growled. "You wanted single combat. You will finish it as a wolf." With brutal efficiency, she systematically destroyed him, breaking his legs to prevent retreat, tearing chunks from his flanks, reducing the Western Alpha to a whimpering, bleeding ruin. The enemy army watched in horror. Their invincible leader, the conqueror of 12 territories, was being dismantled by a woman who had learned to shift yesterday. Finally, Corvinus went limp. "Submit," Elowen commanded, her voice echoing across the valley. "Submit, and your pack may live." For a long moment there was only the sound of Corvinus's labored breathing. Then, slowly, impossibly, he exposed his throat. A collective gasp rose from the enemy ranks. Several wolves began to flee. Others dropped to their bellies in instinctive submission. Elowen stood over her broken enemy, her white fur stained with his blood. She could kill him. Every instinct screamed for her to finish it, to end the threat permanently. But she thought of Ashwin. She thought of the mother she wanted to be. Strong but not cruel. powerful but not monstrous. She released Corvinus's throat. "You will return to your territory," she announced, her voice carrying to every wolf present. "You will disband your alliance with the Covenant. And if you ever threaten Thornvale again, if you so much as look at my son, I will not show mercy a second time." Corvinus whimpered in acknowledgement. Elowen turned her back on him and walked toward her mate. Behind her, the enemy army began to scatter. But on the ridge overlooking the valley, hidden among the blood mages of the Dreadmoon Covenant, a figure in a black hood raised a staff crackling with dark energy. "The Alpha may have fallen," the figure whispered, "but the Moonborn's trial has just begun." Elowen was halfway across the valley when she felt it. A wrongness in the air, like the static before a lightning strike. "Move." Her wolf's warning came a fraction of a second before a bolt of black lightning struck the ground where she had been standing. The explosion sent shockwaves rippling outward, knocking wolves off their feet on both sides. On the ridge, the Dreadmoon Covenant had abandoned all pretense of alliance. 300 blood mages stepped forward, their staffs raised, chanting in a language that predated the first pack. The sky above the valley darkened as storm clouds gathered with unnatural speed. "Did you think we needed Corvinus?" The hooded figure descended the slope, power crackling around them like a cloak. "He was a distraction, a fool to keep your attention while we prepared." The figure pulled back her hood, revealing a face that was hauntingly familiar. Ravenna's features, but older, crueler. "I am Valeth Crow," she announced, "High Priestess of the Dreadmoon Covenant, Corvinus's sister, and Ravenna's aunt." She smiled, and her teeth were filed to points. "My niece was a disappointment, but useful for placing me close to the Moonborn before her awakening. Now, child, you will complete your purpose." Elowen snarled, but before she could charge, Valeth slammed her staff into the ground. A circle of black fire erupted around Elowen, trapping her in place. The flames did not burn her body, they burned something deeper. Her connection to the moon goddess flickered and dimmed. "Moonborn blood is the key to ultimate power," Valeth explained, advancing through the chaos. 300 years ago, we hunted your kind to near extinction, harvesting your essence to fuel our dark rituals. But we always knew one more would rise." Her eyes gleamed with fanatical hunger. "Your ancestors' deaths granted us centuries of power. Yours will grant us eternity." Elowen felt her strength draining. The black fire was siphoning her essence, her wolf retreating deeper into the void of her soul. "No," she thought desperately. "I just found my son. I just found my mate. I cannot fail now." From across the valley she heard Kaelin roar her name. He was fighting toward her, cutting through blood mages, but there were too many. He would not reach her in time. Seraphina was engaged in her own battle, silver light clashing against black as she dueled 3 mages simultaneously. Elowen was alone. "Not alone," her wolf whispered faintly. "Never alone. Look deeper." Elowen closed her eyes, turning inward. Past the pain, past the draining darkness, she searched for the source of her power, and she found it. Not a wolf, not a beast. Something older, something infinite, the moon goddess herself. "Child," a voice spoke, vast and gentle and terrible. "You have suffered much. Do you wish for this to end?" "I wish to protect my family," Elowen replied. "I wish to destroy those who threaten the innocent." "Then stop holding back. You are not just a wolf, little one. You are my vessel. My chosen. My wrath made flesh." Elowen's eyes snapped open. They were no longer silver. They were white. Absolute, infinite, blinding. The black fire around her did not extinguish. It reversed. The siphoned energy flooded back into her body 10-fold, 100-fold, pulling power from the mages themselves. Valeth stumbled backward, her face contorting with shock. "Impossible!" The ritual, the binding. Elowyn rose into the air. Her human form dissolved entirely, replaced by something that was not quite wolf and not quite god. A creature of pure lunar energy, radiant and terrible, with wings of silver light spreading across the darkened sky. The blood mages screamed as their own power was ripped from their bodies and consumed by the ascending goddess. Valeth tried to flee. She managed 3 steps. Elowyn raised one luminous hand. "You wanted Moonborn essence," she said, her voice harmonizing with 1,000 others across 1,000 years. "Receive it." A pillar of silver fire descended from the heavens, engulfing Violet and the remaining Covenant members. There was no explosion, no dramatic battle. They simply ceased to exist. The storm clouds parted. Sunlight broke through, bathing the valley in golden warmth. Elowyn descended slowly, her divine form fading, leaving behind a woman, exhausted, naked, and trembling, but alive. Kaelin caught her before she hit the ground. "I have you," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I have you." Elowyn smiled weakly. "Take me to our son." 3 months had passed since the Battle of the Valley. The Western Territory had been absorbed into Thornvale under a treaty of unconditional surrender. Corvinus Crow lived, but as a broken shell of a man, stripped of his title and banished to the rogue lands he had once used to threaten others. Ravenna had been given a choice: execution or service. She had chosen service. Today, the great hall of Thornvale Citadel was transformed. Banners of silver and white hung from every pillar. Representatives from all 13 territories had gathered, filling the hall with the most powerful wolves on the continent. At the center, a raised dais held 2 thrones, one of black granite for the Alpha King, and beside it, a new throne carved from white moonstone. Elowyn stood at the base of the dais, wearing a gown of liquid silver that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. Her pale hair was woven with moonstones, and in her arms she held Prince Ashwin, healthy, smiling, his violet eyes bright with joy. He had not cried once since the night his mother returned. "Kneel before me," Seraphina's voice rang out. "Elowyn of the Moonborn line, last of the Lunaire bloodline, chosen vessel of the Moon Goddess." Elowyn knelt, passing Ashwin to a waiting nurse. Seraphina lifted a crown of woven silver and crystal, holding it aloft for all to see. "By right and divine mandate, I name you Luna of Thornvale, High Queen of the Northern Territories, and protector of the Moonborn Conclave Reborn." The crown settled onto Elowyn's head. It fit perfectly. She rose and turned to face the crowd. At the back of the hall, barely visible in the shadows, Ravenna knelt in the simple gray dress of a servant. Her hands, once soft and manicured, were raw from scrubbing floors. She did not look up. Elowyn met her gaze anyway. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Kaelin took her hand, interlacing their fingers as they ascended to their thrones together. The mate bond hummed between them, healed, whole, unbreakable. "Long live the Alpha King!" the crowd roared. "Long live the Moonborn Queen!" Elowyn looked out at the sea of faces, former enemies, new allies, and family she had never known existed. She thought of the attic room where she had once slept on straw, dreaming of a past she could not remember. That girl was gone. In her place sat a queen. If you enjoyed this story and want more werewolf romances, dark fantasy twists, and epic revenge tales, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for listening.